I want you to picture something frustratingly familiar. You, uh, you turn on the news, and there's a story about a massive crisis. Maybe it's the housing shortage. Maybe it's crumbling infrastructure or, waiting lists in the healthcare system. It feels big, unmanageable, and frankly, scary.
Right.
And then cut to the press conference.
The podium, the flags, the very serious expressions.
Exactly. And the government announces a solution. But it's not a law. It's not a check. It's a new agency, a task force.
An arm's length body.
Yeah, with a shiny new logo and a very, very long name.
It's the classic "we are taking this seriously" move.
Right. And for a minute, you feel better. You think, okay, the adults are in charge. They've handed this off to the experts. But then fast forward 5 years. The logo is faded. The task force has been merged with another task force.
Yeah.
And the potholes are still there. The waiting lists are longer. And you're left wondering, was that actually a solution or was it just a way to buy time?
That feeling right there, that cycle of relief followed by cynicism is the core of what we're exploring today. We're diving into a piece of research on the architecture of delegation.
Okay.
And honestly, it pulls the curtain back on why so many government promises feel like they just end up in a graveyard of good intentions.
And just to set the stage, we aren't just bashing bureaucracy today. That's too easy. We're looking at the actual mechanics, this tool called delegation.
Right.
Governments love to take a problem and just shove it over to a new agency. The big question is that a brilliant way to save democracy by getting things done? Or is it just a fancy way for politicians to hide from hard choices?
It's the essential question. The research identifies this as a familiar move.
Well,
When a problem gets too complex, too slow, or, and this is key, too politically risky to handle in Parliament, the system steps sideways.
stepping sideways implies they're dodging the bullet.
In a way, they are. They create a body. Think of things like the Federal Reserve, the CDC, or an independent infrastructure commission. They give it a mandate, and they put distance between the problem and the elected officials who usually get blamed for it.
But hold on. Let me play devil's advocate here. Isn't that a good thing?
Huh?
I mean, do we really want politicians who are worried about getting reelected every few years, deciding interest rates?
Or safety standards for nuclear power plants, yeah.
Right. Isn't stepping sideways just admitting that maybe the experts should run the show?
That is the steel man argument, yes. And the research agrees delegation can work. It can act as an extension of government. Ideally, it protects long-term thinking from the daily noise of short-term politics.
It's like Ulysses,
Go on.
tying himself to the mast so he doesn't steer the ship into the rocks when he hears the sirens.
That's a great analogy. The politician ties themselves up so they can't mess with the long-term plan.
Yeah.
Exactly. But, here's the massive but. It doesn't always work that way. The research draws a sharp line between two scenarios. There's the extension scenario, which is the Ulysses moment where it worked.
And the other one.
And then there's the parking scenario.
Parking. That doesn't sound as heroic.
It's not. And understanding the difference between extending power and just parking a problem is the key to understanding why your housing crisis isn't getting fixed.
Okay, so let's break down the extension scenario first. What does it look like when we actually get this right?
So when it works, delegation amplifies what Parliament is capable of. It gives a problem room to breathe.
Room to breathe.
Think about it. Parliament is frantic, it's reactive, it's loud. Some problems, like climate policy or pension sustainability, need 20 years of quiet, consistent work.
Which you are never going to get on the floor of the House.
Never. So you create a body to handle it. But for that body to work, it needs stable expectations that survive more than one political moment. It can't just be the flavor of the month.
The research points to a very specific example here, and I want to dig into it because it's kind of the gold standard for this.
The OBR.
The OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility in the UK.
Right. This is a fascinating case study. The OBR was set up to basically check the government's homework on the economy.
Right.
Before the OBR, the government would just announce, hey, growth is going to be amazing next year. And everyone just had to take their word for it.
Which, shocker, turned out to be optimistic most of the time.
Mildly.
Oh.
So they set up the OBR to provide independent forecasts. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Why does the OBR work? Is it because the politicians love it?
I would assume no, because it probably tells them things they don't want to hear.
Exactly. It works because its design assumes disagreement. It isn't built on friendship, it's built on friction.
Can you explain that mechanism? Because if a prime minister doesn't like what the OBR says, couldn't they just fire them or, ignore them?
They could try. But the architecture, the way it was built, makes the cost of ignoring them incredibly high. If the chancellor stands up and says, we can afford these tax cuts, and the OBR publishes a report at the same time saying, no, you actually can't.
The markets react.
Instantly.
Yeah.
Borrowing costs go up, the currency crashes. We've actually seen this play out in the real world. When governments try to bypass these institutions, the economic backlash is immediate and brutal.
I see.
So the OBR has authority not because it's popular, but because it has survivability. It has become a fixed point. It doesn't reset every time a new party takes power.
So the key metric isn't, do we like them? It's, can we get rid of them?
In a way, yes. Its authority comes from consistency. It forces the government to operate within reality. That is delegation acting as an extension of democratic governance.
Okay, so that's the dream. A body that forces politicians to stay honest and survives the political storms. But let's be real. Most of the agencies we hear about in the news don't feel like that.
No, they don't.
They feel ineffective.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the parking scenario.
This is the dark side of delegation. This happens when a government creates an agency not to solve a problem, but to get the problem off their desk.
I don't know what to do with this, so
Yeah.
here, you hold it.
Precisely. They create a body, give it a vague mission, but, and this is critical, the politicians upstream haven't actually agreed on what the results should be. They haven't resolved the conflict.
So they're exporting their own indecision.
They are parking it. And what happens? The world keeps turning. The context changes. The policy priorities shift. And this poor agency is left in limbo.
Right.
It has the responsibility, but no real power to navigate the changes because the political direction is just a mess.
The research uses an analogy here that I found really depressing, but also perfect. The babysitter.
It's hard, doesn't it?
It really does. Break that down for us. Why a babysitter?
Well, think about what a babysitter does. You hire them to keep the status quo.
Keep things ticking over.
Keep the kids alive, fed, and safe until the parents get home. You do not hire a babysitter to renovate the kitchen or knock down a wall.
Right. If you came home and the babysitter had remodeled the living rooms, you'd be furious.
Exactly. Babysitters, by design, don't redesign the house. But here's the trap. We act like we've hired an architect. We announce, this new agency is going to solve the housing crisis. But we give them the powers of a babysitter.
So we're expecting them to build a new wing of the house, but we've only given them authority to order pizza and watch TV.
And then 5 years later, we scream, why is the house still too small? Well, because you hired a babysitter to do a builder's job. You parked the problem because you didn't want to deal with the noise of construction.
That makes so much sense, and it explains why so many of these bodies feel like they're just treading water. But there's another layer to this failure. It's not just about the mandate. It's about the people, or rather, how long the people stick around.
This was the part of the research that really stopped me in my tracks. They call it the strange inversion.
The strange inversion?
Yeah.
It sounds like a sci-fi movie.
It's a bit of a horror story for governance. The researchers compared two groups of people. On one side, you have the observers.
Okay.
These are the pundits, the think tank analysts, the journalists who critique policy.
The talking heads, the people who write the op-eds saying everything is broken.
Right. And on the other side, you have the doers. The people actually hired to run these massive agencies, the heads of the NHS trusts, the infrastructure projects, the housing boards.
Okay, so observers versus doers. Who stays longer?
The observers are the permanent fixtures. It is not uncommon to see a political commentator or a policy analyst in their lane for 10, 15, maybe 20 years.
Wow.
They have tenure.
And the doers.
The people meant to deliver generational change. They are cycling through their roles every 3 to 4 years. Sometimes faster.
Wait, stop. 3 years.
3 years.
We were talking about fixing national infrastructure,
Yeah.
building high-speed rail, reforming a healthcare system. These are 20-year projects.
Yeah.
And the person in charge is gone before they even learn where the bathroom is.
It creates what is called the horizon problem. Think about the mismatch. We ask these leaders to manage risks that span decades,
Okay.
but we give them a tenure that barely outlasts a single parliamentary cycle.
It's like trying to build a cathedral, but you fire the lead architect every time the wind changes direction.
Exactly. And think about the incentives that creates. If you know you're only going to be in the job for 3 years, are you going to start the difficult, painful, unglamorous work of digging a deep foundation?
No.
Work that won't show results until you're long gone.
No way. You're going to do something flashy that looks good in a press release next week. You're going to paint the walls, not fix the wiring.
Precisely. You act short-term, and this explains why long-term policy feels so provisional, why everything is constantly under review. A new leader comes in, scraps the old plan, starts a new review, and then leaves before the new plan is implemented.
It's not accountability. It's just instability masked as accountability.
And compared to the private sector, capital-intensive firms, this level of churn is insane. No serious company would run a 20-year project by swapping the CEO every 36 months.
So hearing all this, my gut reaction is, we clearly don't trust these people. If we trusted them, we'd give them 10-year contracts, right? We'd let them settle in. Is this a trust issue?
You would think so. We often frame it that way in the media. Do we trust the technocrats? Do we trust the unelected officials? But the research argues that do we trust them is actually the wrong question entirely.
How could it be the wrong question? Trust seems pretty fundamental.
Because trust is fragile. It evaporates. The research argues that systems don't hold together because of trust. They hold together because of structure.
Structure over trust. What does that mean in practice?
Go back to the OBR example. Does the system work because the chancellor trusts the OBR?
No.
No. It works because the structure makes walking away costly.
It's like a contract.
Exactly. Think about a prenuptial agreement. You don't sign a prenup because you rely on the good vibes of the relationship lasting forever. You sign it so that if things go wrong, there is a structure that dictates what happens. It binds you.
So in government terms, we need prenups for our agencies. We need structures that make it painful for politicians to meddle, regardless of whether they trust the agency or not.
Yes. If the structure is solid, you don't need everyone to be friends. You just need the incentives to align. But if the structure is weak, if the agency serves at the pleasure of a minister who can fire them on a whim,
then you're relying on good vibes. And in politics, good vibes last about as long as a carton of milk in the sun.
Exactly. And this leads us to the biggest philosophical point of the whole deep dive, the multiplier effect.
This sounded a bit like physics when I read it.
Yeah.
What is the multiplier effect here?
It's the idea that delegation isn't a magic wand, it's a multiplier. It amplifies whatever system it's plugged into.
So if you plug it into a dysfunctional system,
you get amplified dysfunction. If Parliament, the upstream source of power, is short-termist, frantic, reactive, and obsessed with the daily news cycle,
then creating an agency doesn't cure that.
No, it just stretches that chaos out. The agency becomes a shock absorber. It takes the hits, it buffers the politicians from failure, but it doesn't actually solve the problem.
That is actually kind of a heavy realization.
Yeah.
It means we can't just blame the bureaucrats when things fail.
Right, and we do that all the time. We say, oh, the agency is incompetent. But the uncomfortable conclusion here is that the failure of an arm's-length body is usually a signal of failure at the center.
The center being Parliament itself.
Yes. If ministers rotate every 2 years, which they do, and delivery leaders rotate every 3 years, you haven't fixed the instability. You've just exported it down the chain.
You've infected the agency.
You've infected the agency with the same virus that Parliament has.
So if I'm listening to this and I'm frustrated about the state of my city or my country, if I see an agency failing, I should just look at the agency. I need to look at who set it up.
You have to look at the soil, not just the plant. If you plant a seed in toxic soil, don't blame the seed when it dies. Parliament has to decide what it is and isn't willing to design for.
Which brings us to the so what for the listener, because most of us aren't designing government agencies. We're just trying to get by. Why does this matter to us?
It matters because it changes how we should consume the news. It changes what we should demand. Next time you see a headline saying, government launches new task force on housing, don't celebrate. And don't just roll your eyes either.
What should we do?
Ask the structural question. Ask, is this designed for survivability? Does this body have a mandate that is stronger than the current minister's career?
Look for the prenup.
Look for the prenup. Ask if this is a babysitter hired to watch the problem or an architect hired to fix it. Because if it's a babysitter, nothing is going to change.
It really shifts the focus from who is running it to how is it built. It's the architecture of delegation.
Exactly. It reminds us that major societal problems often feel stuck in a loop, not because they are unsolvable, but because we haven't built the containers that allow the solutions to survive long enough to work.
That is a sobering thought, but also kind of empowering. It stops us from just thinking all politicians are bad and starts us thinking the design is bad.
Right.
And designs can be fixed.
They can be, but, and this is the final provocation from the research, it requires Parliament to look in the mirror.
The final challenge.
The research ends by suggesting that the solution isn't really about designing better agencies at all. It's about Parliament facing what it has been trying to step around.
Stepping around the fact that they are addicted to the short term.
If Parliament cannot fix its own relationship with time, if it can't commit to anything longer than a news cycle, can it ever really delegate success? Or will it only ever delegate failure?
That is the question. Until the center holds, the edges will always fray.
Couldn't have put it better myself.
Well, on that cheery note, no, seriously, this has completely changed how I'm going to look at the next government announcement. I'm going to be looking for the structural glue.
It's the only thing that holds.
Thank you so much for breaking this down with us. It's a dense topic, but man, is it relevant.
My pleasure. It was a great discussion.
And to everyone listening, thanks for diving deep with us. Keep asking those hard questions, and we'll see you on the next one.